where I was just working at Starbucks. So I worked at Starbucks for about like 5 years. Last month, I brought in a little bit over 17K in commissions. For the past like 4 months, I've been bringing in over 10K.
Ethan, what's up, man? Nice name. Nice to have you on here. And I'm sure viewers will have lots of gems in this conversation because I have been watching all your coaching call reviews in our community, and they're all like super tactical, super banger pieces of advice. I'm like, do not sleep on Ethan's calls. Do not sleep on either of the Ethan's calls, honestly. And so, for those of you who don't know who you are, what you do, can you give us like a quick sort of 60-second synopsis of what that looks like?
Yeah. So my name is Ethan as well. I've been in the high ticket space for about 4 years. I've been setting most of my career. Currently I'm leading a team full of setters. Shout out to Matt, putting me in that position. But yeah. I'm also been working the remote life for quite some time, and I feel like I'm well seasoned at the space, so very excited to be here.
And so, how long have you been in the space now, in total?
I've been in the space. I'm about to hit 4 years now.
4 years now. Okay, cool. And what's like in those 4 years, like what's been like your biggest sort of record month hit?
Would actually be last month. So last month I brought in a little bit over 17K in commissions. Recently, for the past like 4 months, I've been bringing in over 10K. But last month I kind of went hog wild and brought in 17K, which is my personal best. But yeah.
Nice, nice. And that's just setting deals. That like setting appointments for closers. You're not like closing out on any of those.
No. Just straight setting appointments, calling them, setting the appointments. They show up, they close. Straight setting.
Cool.
It's
Okay.
it's funny how you talk about 10K a month. You're like, oh yeah, I've been doing 10K a month for a while now, but the best month was 17. It's so funny to hear that because there's so many people that are looking to do exactly what you're doing, where making 10K a month average is the norm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely wasn't easy, right? I've had to learn a lot of stuff from you and other people, a lot of coaching, but I feel like I found my own little formula to be able to consistently be able to hit that for sure.
Killer.
Nice.
Killer. And we'll get into, the specifics behind that in a bit so people can kind of peel back the layers on that like an onion, like what's in the center there to get there themselves.
Sure.
But like if we just kind of, as Aaron always used to say, rewind back the clocks and kind of bring it back to where like it all started for you. I guess like what did that look like for you? What was going on in your life before you kind of got into this space?
Yeah, so I got into the space a little later than I would have hoped for. I got into the space when I was 21, 22, around there. Before that, I tried going to college right after high school. Really wasn't for me. I had this big passion and still love animals. So I wanted to become a vet, but going to school and everything, it just wasn't for me, right? So after like a year or two, I just dropped out of college and I was in this bit of a limbo phase where I was just working at Starbucks. So I worked at Starbucks for about like 5 years. Um, and funny enough, I was pretty happy there, right? I worked with a lot of cool people. I thought the money I was making was okay. I was still able to live somewhat of the lifestyle that I wanted. But keep in mind, I was 18, 19, 20, 21, so I didn't really have much of a lifestyle. And then the older I began to get, I began to see some of the people around me growing, and I wasn't able to catch up to them. Right. And so I tried looking into all these different things online to see what would hit. But ultimately, I still wasn't really motivated enough. I was still pretty content with the life I was living. And then ultimately one day I got sick, some kidney condition I got sick with. It wasn't anything too crazy, but it was pretty rare. It put me in the hospital for about a couple days. And that was the first time I've ever been hospitalized. So when I got out of the hospital, or more so when I was in the hospital, all I was thinking about was getting out of there, right? I hate being here. I can't wait to go back to work. Can't wait to go back to my normal life. I dreaded it so much. And finally, when I got out, like maybe 2 days after I got out, I went back to work and I was so excited to see the people I was going to see, go back to my routine. And then something just hit me that like, when I was there, it wasn't enough. I didn't feel what I thought I was going to feel. Being happy to be back, I didn't have any satisfaction doing what I was doing now, and so then it kind of hit me like, you know what, I need to do something. And so my initial response was to try to go back to school, right? I was going to do a course about like 1 or 2 years, and it was going to get me certified to become a PTA, something quick, easy money. Um, But in the midst of that, I was still looking online to see what stuff would click for me. And so I ran into, drop shipping, Amazon FBA, and ultimately I ran into, I'm sure most people know, Cole Gordon's RCA course. And so I ended up booking a call. I ended up booking a call from the day that I saw it to the next day. And eventually I showed up to the call, and I liked what I was hearing. And one thing led to another, and I ended up, joining the program for RCA. And keep in mind, this was 2 days before I was supposed to finalize everything at school. So like I was already about to jump into school, hands on, and I don't know what made me do it. Obviously it took a lot of motivation on the call, and ever since then I started, my setting career and hopped into a few different offers, and pretty much I'm at where I'm at now, thankfully.
Ask, like, at that time you were working those sort of Starbucks jobs and stuff like that, and I believe the price point at that point that you bought in was around like that 10K mark to get in, right?
Yeah.
So like how did you kind of work through that and justify that investment at the time?
Well, I didn't justify it myself. The thing about getting into the space is that you see how other people help you achieve your dreams and really push you more than you thought you really could. And so the person I was speaking with at the time, his name is John Herrick. A lot of people would know him in the space. He was, I guess you would say, the closer. And so I spoke with him, spilled everything that I wanted at the moment, more time, more money. And funny enough, when I was gonna it came down time to purchasing, I wimped out. I wasn't gonna do it. I told him no, I'm gonna do this. Let me think it through. I was gonna get paid that night, and so I told him, let me get paid tonight, and then I'll reach out to you tomorrow. Obviously, I was never planning on reaching back out to him, and so me and him went back and forth. It was like a battle. Funny enough, I have this Zoom call for that. I rewatch it sometimes, and so it was a battle between me and him. And then at one point he told me, you know what, bro, let's cut the BS. Let's say, I let you go. Realistically speaking, you're not gonna come back, and that's fine. But let's say you hold on to it was gonna be a half, so 5K. Let's say you hold down to that 5K right now. You're gonna feel happy because you still have that in your pocket. But what's gonna happen when you wake up tomorrow morning? You're still gonna be in the same position you're in right now before you hopped into the call. Wanting more time, more freedom, and what are you gonna do then? And it was one of those situations where I had nothing else. I had nothing else to say. He left me speechless with that, right? Like he got me. And so sit there quietly for a couple minutes, and then I just said, you know what, F it, let's do it. Gave him my card, I paid, and that's how he got me across the line. So I had my own motivations, but really he saw me see that, doing nothing was worse, sorry, than maybe, being down $5,000 thinking, being a little worried about some money and,
And did you pay that in like cash in the bank that you had, or did you invest in that with credit?
no. So that was paid it for debit card. I paid it out of my debit card. I didn't even have a credit card at the time. So that was all
Okay.
my cash.
So
Maybe I was
it was like hours, like hundreds of hours of Starbucks, clocking in, clocking out. That 5K was like you were like, man, I worked hard for that money.
Yeah, luckily I had a very minimalistic lifestyle. I didn't have a car at the time. I still lived at home. I didn't even pay rent. So all the money I was making at Starbucks, it just kept on building in the bank, right? And even
Hmm.
though it felt good to have all that money because I do know how many hours I worked to get it, yes, it very hesitant to do it for sure.
Cool.
How long were you in the program before you got your first role?
Um, I think about a month, right?
Okay.
So once I went through I invested into it. I'm all like, I mean, I spent all this money. I'm gonna have to make it worth it. So I jumped into it right away. Day one, went through the training, took notes like crazy, jumped in all these mock calls. I reached out to everybody. And so I made it pretty obvious to my coach at the time that I wanted to get on roll. Like, this is what I want to do. I'm taking this serious. Put me on, put me on, coach, anywhere you want to put me. And yeah, luckily I landed my first role within a month. It was an Airbnb offer. We were telling people how to get into Airbnb, short-term rentals, that kind of stuff. And luckily, just with the base that I was making there, I had already replaced my income completely at Starbucks, just
What
with the
was
base,
that?
$2,000.
Okay.
So I was making 2,000 a month at Starbucks, working all those hours, just with the base at that offer. I replaced it completely. So
And
already it
that's
was
an
a
entry level job that you
yeah.
trained for in 1 month to get, and you were going to go back to school for 2 years.
Yeah. I was gonna go back to school to make maybe like $5 extra more than I was making at Starbucks, right? But still, all those long hours and everything would have been there. But just with the base at the offer that I was on, it completely replaced my income, and then everything else, the commission was just
That's
on top of
crazy.
that, right? So for me, it felt like a win right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to follow up with that too, because I know like at that time that program was more predicated towards like closers than setters, right? And so like how did that sort of first few months like work with you? Did you feel like, you were earning, yeah, I mean, just how did that work with you? I guess you can kind of take that question the way you want.
Yeah, so I mean, the good thing about the space is that it helps you understand kind of where you're at, and it teaches you right away that it's skill set based, right? It's not more so what you think you deserve, but more so the skill set that you have is going to put you where you deserve to be. And so, because I knew I was new to the space, and I did go through some of the closer training, I'm like, this is way too advanced for me, right? And so I went through the setter training, and I'm like, this is great, entry level. I know what this is talking about. I can pick this up pretty quick. So I didn't feel any sort of way negatively that I wasn't closing right away. I'm glad that I put myself in a position where I wanted to be initially, right? Making more money. I already had more time on my hands. I was working remote, spending more time with my family, which is initially the goal. So even though I wasn't closing, even up until now that I'm not closing, I don't feel any sort of way about it. I've been able to upgrade my life in many different ways without having to go into closing. So I don't think that downplaying setting is in any way fair, because based on what I've seen and what I've done, setting has taken me many different places without even having to do any sort of closing.
Yeah. And there's plenty of closers that are only doing 10, 11, 12K a month. And that's like what you're doing with setting. And then especially when you did that 17K month, that's like what the most average closers are making anyway. So you're honestly having more flexibility in your calendar and making just as much as what a closer would anyways.
Yeah. I think there are currently like 4 or 5 setters on our team, closers on our team, and I've made more than the bottom performers, right? Obviously, the top performers, they made a good amount, but yeah, that's very comforting for me to know that I don't have to be closing to be making as much money as a closer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just setting appointments.
Pretty much, yeah. I personally don't feel that closing is for me. I mean, people have their own interest, right? I've thought about it, but the idea of closing and sitting down on a Zoom call for about an hour really isn't for me. I still feel like I'm helping people, making an impact in people's lives just by sitting, the exact. My initial goal getting into the high ticket space was to get out of Starbucks. I achieved that within a month. And then second, my goal was to get a car because I didn't have a car. I achieved that within 3 to 4 months. Eventually, the plan was to be able to move out, get my own space. I achieved that within a year, right? And so this is the second time I've moved out. I've been able to, adopt 2 kittens, living at home with my girlfriend, and I've become completely independent, right? Thanks to setting. And so like I feel like the more that I raise my own standards with setting, the more the standards of my own lifestyle begin to raise as well. So I'm very, very grateful for sure.
So let's talk about those like standards for a second. Can you like walk us through like the story of sort of like different offers that you've been on, sort of standards for your income and sets? Like has that changed over time and like what that's looked like for you?
100%, 100%. So obviously, getting to that first offer initially, I was just glad to be making more than I was making at Starbucks. So that was the initial standard. And then the more I began to build up my income, keep in mind at the time I was still living at home. I wasn't paying rent. Expenses were really low. I managed to get my own car. I got a new car that had just came out the year, so payments were really high, and so that kind of raised my lifestyle a little bit because obviously I didn't want to fall back on payments, etc. And so then I began to add a bunch of stuff to myself, right? So I began investing a little bit into like crypto. So stuff that I wanted to do, like just began to raise my lifestyle, right? And began to see I need to be making minimum this much to be able to do this, but obviously I want to be making more. And so every time I started getting into a new offer, I already had a certain standard, right? So this is what I need to be making to maintain the lifestyle I want to live, but ultimately I have these goals that I'm still trying to achieve. And so one of the bigger I guess one of the bigger goals that I had at the time was also moving out, and that was going to be the biggest financial commitment and financial goal I was going to make at the time, being able to pay rent by myself. And so eventually I got to that point, right, when I was paying rent, moved out with myself, paying utilities, light, internet, like all these things begin to add up, and so that kind of raised my standard as well, right? But eventually I got to the point where I feel like I built my skill set enough to where my lifestyle was really easily attainable. And so more so I was reaching the goal of a monetary goal. And so it went from like 6K, 7K, 8K. And so now the minimum that I'm trying to achieve anytime I go into an offer would be pretty much about like 10K, which luckily I've been able to consistently hit.
Totally. And so your first offer was that Airbnb offer. What was the next offer you went to from there?
RCA. I started working with
Okay.
yeah, I did pretty well at that original company with the Airbnb offer, and I caught eye of some of the people at RCA, and so eventually that first offer didn't really work out too well, and so when I was in the limbo of picking up a new job, they just kind of grabbed me like, hey, we think you'd be great for RCA, and so they just kind of took me there, right, which is pretty cool, right, because I got to kind of I guess sell something firsthand that I was doing myself. So
Yeah.
that was a really fun experience. That's kind of where I met you, and I met a bunch of other people that I know in the space. But yeah, I went from there to RCA.
Nice. So then essentially, 4 years and then what, three offers now because you've been on with Springs for about a year now?
Yes.
Nice. Cool, man. What's been your favorite offer that you've ever worked for so far?
Even though I think I'm making a lot of money with Springs, it would have to be RCA. It
Yeah.
would have to be RCA, right? Because I've grown to really care about the cause and what we do here at Springs, but there's really nothing like being able to sell something that you're doing yourself. Right. And a lot of times when I was on the setting calls with a lot of people in RCA, I would literally, go off the floor of the call and be like, hey man, like, pretty much what you're doing now is what I'm doing. And I could tell you from firsthand experience that it's possible. What you're trying to achieve, trying to get out of the minimum wage job, just by achieving your first role, you're able to do that because I did that. Right.
Yeah.
So I would say that definitely the funnest offer that I've been on would have to be RCA, not only because of the offer, but because of the people that I work with as well.
Okay, so between like those three offers, then I guess a lot of people I get asked all the time. It's like, where the heck do you find these offers? How do you get these opportunities? Where do I go? Right. So what did that look like for you for each of those three? I imagine the first one was from the pipeline from the program you purchased.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that my experience is a little different. I have a lot of people ask me this, like, how did you find these offers? And funny enough, like the first offer, yeah, was from the pipeline. So I interviewed for it. I was very new to the space. But going into RCA, I was just kind of because I performed very well in my initial offer, they just kind of grabbed me. I didn't really have to interview for RCA. I just had the first day I spoke with somebody on the team, I was just kind of onboarded there. Like, we think you'd be great. Would you like to work here? I said yes. The next day I started dialing. And same thing happened with the company that I'm at now. I didn't really have to interview. I did pretty well at RCA, and they just kind of grabbed me here. And they're like, you know what? We think you'd be great here. Do you want it? Yes. Did onboarding, and I started dialing right away. So I was a little bit of a different approach to the way that I got into these offers because I didn't really have to interview. I was just kind of grabbed, and there was alignment right away.
But for people who like don't know even like the pipelines or like what that is, like how like for example, like how would they know like what numbers you're doing in the Airbnb offer that they could just snatch you, or how could they put you on this like Springs offer? Like how is it all sort of like connected?
Well, I think that the high ticket space, even though there are so many different companies, I feel like a lot of people know each other. Right. I feel like they know each other. And so, like, not only is performing and putting out numbers is very important in the space, but also just building connections, right? Getting to know your leaders, getting to know the people that you're working with. I personally felt that every person that I've worked with, that I guess has been my boss, has been some sort of a mentor for me. And so that's initially what happened. When I got into the Airbnb, into RCA, my boss at the time was very close with Brian Ostermiller. And so when that company wasn't really working, all he had to do was like, hey, Ethan is really good. You should give him a chance. Brian spoke to me, grabbed me, and brought me here. And so I feel like a big part of that is just not just kind of working endlessly, but really getting to know the people that you're working with. These connections is very, very big, right? And so same thing has happened with Springs. And so luckily, because I've built such a good relationship with Matt, Matt has opened so many different doors for me. And really, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be in a position where I'm leading a team, which is ultimately my goal, right? And so even though I feel like, these numbers and everything you do could be really great, I definitely think that building connections in the space is just as important as producing good numbers, in my opinion.
And how what makes you so good? Like how do you produce these numbers, you know? What's the
Man.
secret sauce?
um, it's hard to say because I mean I work with a lot of people and they ask me pretty much I think the same question, right? And I've had people like shadow me and they're like, "What do you do?" And to be honest, I feel like I just kind of do everything I guess you would say by the book, but to a T, right? So like This might be getting a little too specific, but like when it comes to the follow-up process, when it comes to tech sequences, when it comes to nurturing, I feel like I just began to learn these kind of things. And I mean, if we talk about this, it would be a whole different kind of podcast, right? But I just feel like everything that you need to learn, I begin to master it, but not only on the clock when you're working, but off the clock. So I've made it a very big thing, part of my lifestyle that I have to learn, that I had to learn over time to be able to completely disconnect. Because even though I love what I do, if I make this my entire life, and I did at one point, it begins to affect negatively the way that you perform on when you're talking to people, your mentality. And so I think a very big part of it is being able to just keep an eye on as to why you're doing this, right? Because people really, I've spoken to a lot of people who really get focused on, making money, producing good numbers, and they're like, I don't know why I can't do this. I don't really feel like doing this today. And more so, you have to really think about why you got into this in the first place, right? And so, like, and be grateful that you're in the position that you're in now. So I would say that that's my biggest secret. I'm able to like really disconnect, right? Because when you're able to disconnect, and for example, I like to go to music festivals and watch DJs and stuff. When I'm able to go off a weekend and come back and go back to work, I feel grateful, right? Because I'm able to do all these kind of things because of what I'm doing now. And if I want to continue doing these things, I'm going to have to be able to perform. And the only way I can do both and really balance both is when you be able to disconnect, right? So be 100% in when you're working and be 100% out when you're not. I feel like
Yeah.
that would be the biggest thing. Obviously, there's a lot of little things in between, like, when it comes to setting, skill set that you have to learn, but I feel like that's really the biggest thing for me, at least.
That makes sense. And I'm just gonna unveil the curtain back behind what your secret sauce is, because I've worked with you before and I've looked at your numbers. So, from like an in-work zone, because like you're totally right, what you're doing outside of work, well, like nobody really knows like how well you're taking care of yourself outside of work because we've only seen each other like remotely like this, right? So that on off the field stuff does make really big impact. But as far as the things that I know that you do really well when you're on the field, that literally night and day sets appointment setters apart is the follow up systems and processes. If you actually are doing your follow up, you're like in the top 1% of appointment setters versus everybody else. So, like, that's a huge gap, and you're very diligent with that. It's not just like, oh, one time a month I kind of looked at follow up. No, like, it's something you go through every single day, and you get one or two or three extra sets from that every single day, and that stacks up over time. That's the first thing I've seen you do really well. The second thing that I've seen you do really well is you have like a high work ethic, right? It's not like, oh, hey, like I got this job at home now, so I'm gonna like sit around and watch Netflix all day, right? Like that's not you at all. You're like, hey, like I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna do my job, like and you're serious about hitting the metrics and the KPIs, whereas a lot of people I would say are not as serious, right? So if like and you have a big why behind that, which is exactly what ties into what you were saying, is that if you have a big why, you've got the work ethic, and you do the follow up, like it is entirely possible to hit those numbers. But like if you cut out work ethic, you're not going to hit 10K months. If you cut out follow up, you're not going to hit 10K months. And if you take out taking care of yourself outside of work, then you're definitely not going to be able to last in the industry at all. So I think all that stuff makes a lot of sense. What would you say to somebody like thinking about jumping into the high ticket space? Like, think like, somebody's out there like Googling and like YouTubing, like how to make money online. Like, I know you've seen a lot in the industry over the last couple of years because there's a lot of offers that actually help people start e-com stores and help them do this and help them do that. But like from your standpoint, what would you say is like kind of like the best, fastest, easiest way?
Um, well, I just obviously I'm sound a little biased, right? Because I've been setting, so I think that setting is a great opportunity, right? Because not only could it help your income, but it really helps you grow as an individual, right? For me, English is my second language, right? So this is something that had definitely helped me develop my vocabulary over time, the way that I speak to people, the way that I feel about myself. So I think that this is great. But more so for people thinking about jumping in, I would really tell people to think about why they want to do it. And the reason I say this is because I recently had this conversation with my brother who has been going to school. He's been thinking about it, he doesn't like it, and many of these different things. And I didn't really tell him anything. I'm like, think about what you want to do and think about what the things you're trying to achieve and what are needed, right? And so that he told me that he wanted more time for this, he wanted more income. Was this possible with what you're doing now? No, not really. So really weigh out your options of what you want and what you're doing to be able to get those things that you want. right? And so eventually, once you begin to narrow these things down, you're going to see what your clear options are. And so that's kind of what happened to me over time. And that's kind of what's happening to my brother right now. So I would definitely say to weigh out your options, think about things you're trying to achieve, what needs to be done, what kind of lifestyle you want to live in between then. Um, and from there,
And I remember when on one of your coaching calls, there was someone who had English as their second language. I think it was Rachel, and she said something like, "Oh, I wish English was just my first language because this would be so much easier." And I almost half expected you to be like, "Oh yeah, wouldn't that be the dream? Ha ha ha!" But you were like, "No, like don't say that. Like don't think that. Don't say that." And I feel like accents is a big thing that people like see as like a wall to getting into this industry. And so, what are your kind of thoughts? Like, I remember what you said, but I'd love for you to kind of repeat and kind of hear again for the viewers. Like, what are your thoughts around sort of accents and people getting into this space if English isn't their first language?
no, I will definitely disagree because I mean I've seen it in the past where that hasn't been a barrier for many people. I mean I'm sure you know this person, Matt. You remember Susan from RCA. Right now I think she's closing or leading a team, one of the two. But when she was at the time, she was a top performer, and she had an accent, right? And so with one of my team members on the team right now, his name is Marcus. He has a really like heavy German accent. And a lot of people would think that that's, bringing him down, but he brought in over 30 closed units last month, right? And so I don't think that that gets in the way. If anything, maybe that kind of portrays more of who you are. People get interested in sometimes when you talk to somebody with an accent, you know. But I definitely don't think that's a negative thing, right? I've seen people do better than me. I've seen people really succeed in the space even with an accent. I definitely think it's all about skill set and just I guess the confidence you have on the phone, right? Just really own it, I guess I would say.
Yeah. My favorite accent story to go off of when we talk about accent stories, is there was this guy, his name was Raiz, and he was from India, and he had a really thick Indian accent, like really thick. And then on top of that, he spoke crazy fast. And I'd always be in coaching calls with him, like, Raiz, slow down, man. I'm like, you're talking so fast. And despite that, Raiz's best month is he made 16 grand in a month setting appointments, and he like went and got himself a brand new house. Like, like he definitely, like, you have to have a certain level of work ethic to push beyond that, and the right company has to be able to give you the right shot. But like there's totally, I mean, like I think like between the three setter teams that I'm currently managing right now, like almost half of them all have accents from like all over the globe. Like it's not something that really is like a barrier. It's just if you allow it to be a barrier, if you think it's a barrier, then it's going to be a barrier.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. A lot of people say that I've been living in the States for quite some time, so I think I've lost my accent, but a lot of people have said that my accent comes through. But even then, like I was saying, I don't think that's a barrier, to be honest.
No. You heard of Matei on like I feel like on every coaching call he's done, he always brings up that story where like he was interviewing for like 10 setters or something, and there was that woman with that thick German accent. And the whole time he's like, man, I can like barely understand this woman. And then at like the very tail end of the interview, he's like, okay, last question. Who would you bring on in this interview? In addition to hiring you, who else would you bring on? And I think what he said was like her response was, to be honest, like I wouldn't bring on anyone here because like I don't think anyone has the determination and grit and will work hard as I will. And Mateo was like, okay, kind of badass, but I like it. Well, okay, let's see where this goes. Worst case scenario, I fire her in like a month after ramp up or something. And I think to this day, she's still on an offer. I don't know if Mate's still involved with her or not, but like she's still just like crushing it, man. She's like
Yeah,
this old German lady just destroying. And maybe it's that German accent they got an advantage over everyone else, but I don't know. And you got the Indian accents too. I don't know. There's clearly something there.
yeah. I was gonna say it's if people think that's it's a barrier, I think it's complete BS.
And what would you say about people that are like kind of like weighing out the options? Like now that you've done appointment setting, you can kind of see on like the other side of the curtain like how hard it is to like run your own offer, like the setup, the setters, the closers, the CSM, the fulfillment, the product, like the 11 plus skill sets that you need to run a business versus appointment setting, right? Like in my opinion, I'm like, there's a lot of people out there that help people start businesses online, but it's like one of the things you'd have to learn is appointment setting. If that's not something you even know yet, like why not just start with appointment setting and then start your business later?
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of what I learned when I was in RCA. One of the most important skills that you have to learn, whether ultimately your goal is to build a business or not, is you have to learn how to communicate and you have to learn sales. Right. So if you want to get into doing that, I feel like a good baseline understanding of everything is setting. If you've never done that, if you're completely green into the space, I think it's the best way to get into it. So yeah, I mean, and besides that, it's a complete 9-day difference between wearing all these hats. And just to give you an example, yesterday, I had to run to Petco with my girlfriend to go buy some more cat food, and I ended up taking a call on the way there. And I ended up setting the guy in the car while she was driving, and he showed up today and he closed. Right. And so it becomes very simple, right? Very simple thing. You still get to kind of live the lifestyle you want to live, and you learn a really good skill set along the way, you know.
Where do you kind of see yourself now that you do have the skill set of sort of sales, communication, leadership to an aspect? Where do you kind of see yourself going in the next like couple of years here? You know, between like goals, just like monetary goals, but also like just role wise. Like, you think you're going to stay in this, go into like owning your own business, or what do you see for you?
I mean, luckily, one thing that I also learned getting into my first offer with the Airbnb offer is I've always wanted to get into real estate, right? And because real estate is just supplementary income, passive income in a way, and I think that's a real thing. I just think that you have to go about it to achieve that. But obviously, you do need to be making a good amount of money to do that, right? So, I think with my goal, I'm happy where I'm at right now, leading a team. But obviously, I want to be able to achieve more and more, right? So considering that I've been able to bring in 10K consecutively pretty often, my next goal would be pretty much 15K, right? And I mean, I'm still figuring out what I have to do to do that, but I don't feel like I'm ever going to stay content. I feel like I'm always going to want to grow. Eventually, I want to be able to get to the point where maybe I'm a sales manager or maybe even owning a business. Who knows, right? But I don't ever think I'm ever going to stay here. I'm always going to try to find new opportunities as to what could take me to the next level for sure.
Sure. Like success always leaves sort of breadcrumbs, right? And so with your, you said, was it 16K month that you just did, or was it
17, 17.
like 17?
Yeah, just
Okay,
one
with the
more.
17K month, I guess like if you like had to reverse engineer that between like the 10K months you've been averaging, is there like a just a simple answer to like what was the difference? Was there just like way more leads, or was it, you know, something more than that?
Funny enough, I think there would be two things. Is this would have to do with something on the clock and one off the clock. So we already talked about this with Matt. On the clock, I would say follow up. So I managed to bring in over 60 closed units last month, and about maybe around 40-ish of them were from follow up, my old pipeline, not even new opportunity. Right. So it just kind of goes to show how much money is sitting when people don't work the pipeline, how much money is sitting when people just forget about old leads. Right. So I think follow up is very, very big. And then I would say off the clock would be I recently moved into this new place with my girlfriend and we got new kittens. And so like I had this new sense of motivation as to why I'm doing this, right? Keeping in mind my why. And so putting those two things together, it was very easy, right? Very easy trucking along, very easy in having all these conversations. I didn't even think twice about it. And then the month went by, these closes came in, and I ended up at 17K, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. But then again, it was very easy for me because I really had these two things locked in. I really knew what I had to work on and off the clock, and everything just kind of fell into place, I would say.
Whew. So when you say follow up, like again, it's not like just following up on like a deal from, you know, a couple weeks ago or a month ago. Like you mean it's like all time and like old leads, or how do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I mean, I brought in one of my closes last month with somebody who had opted in a year ago, right? And so you would consider that like a dead lead, right? He could have found other options between then, but he didn't, right? So
So essentially, he was still walking around bald for the last year until he got reactivated.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And funny enough, when I spoke to him, I was like, yeah, I mean, I looked at this about a year ago. I had all these things going on, but I mean, I'm so happy he reached out. You know, everything has begun to calm down. He's running a business. He was, in the process of starting it up. And so a year later, things have begun to calm down. He could focus on other things, right? And these things happen to everybody, right? Just because somebody isn't able to do stuff now, a lot of people get discouraged. But like, there's a lot of power in follow up, and there's a lot of money in follow up too.
Okay. And so follow up and then just really energy management and making sure you've got reminders of doing like why you're doing what you're doing. Super key. Is there anything else if you were advising like young Ethan as he was just getting into this space, just like completely fresh, just most important thing he would kind of need to know or do in order to get started and be successful, even before he saw like the RCA ad?
I sound like a broken record, but honestly, I would feel like the biggest thing is just kind of figuring out what you really want to do in the future. Like it took me until I was 22 to figure out like what you to really look ahead into the future, right? Before then, I never even thought about that. So once you really begin to think about that, you begin to see what steps to be taken to get there. And honestly, that would be the biggest thing. Whether it's something long term or short term, like for example, paying rent, or maybe you have this car or whatever you really want to buy, you begin to have a goal that you feel is attainable, and you begin to see what needs to be done to get there, right? And once you figure that out, it's very easy, in my opinion, right? Because it's very easy to uh, not lose motivation, right? When you have all the motivation you need right there.
Where would people be able to kind of find you, like message you, kind of reach out if they wanted to kind of connect with you more one on one?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm having coaching calls on Saturday Closer. Matt gave me the opportunity to be a coach there, so I have one every Friday morning. People show up. If you want to ask me more questions about my journey or just stuff about setting, how to get into it, I love the coaching calls. So yeah, you could catch me on there.
Killer. Awesome, man. Well, appreciate the time. You are a legend in the space, and you will continue to be one as you grow and become a real estate mogul, all invested by setting money.
We're here in Switzerland.